of Bobcat Virtual PTG for Cinder. And we have quite a few topics for today. And I just remembered to update the Open Infra channel. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so everyone joining now, please write your name on the Etherpad. I have provided a link on the Cinder channel as well as in the chat. You can write your name in the attendees list. And I guess we can start with the first topic, which is follow up more about EOL Rocky and Stein. So, Brian?
Yeah, hi. Okay. I had the action item to kind of summarize the discussion. So that's that Etherpad. So if you look at it, what I did was I took Elod's last message because I figure, Rajat, you'll want to respond to that, and then did the interline thing. So what I'm proposing we say is in bold. So just when you go through it, just so what you're looking at. So I think I captured the points people made. I went back and it was actually a pretty lively discussion. Maybe because I talked a lot, I thought it was a good discussion. I don't know. But anyway, so I've got it here. So see what you think, make additions, and then Rajat, you can decide when you want to reply. So yeah, and after considering discussions, I mean, I was sort of, as you could tell, I was inclined to think keeping the branches around was a good idea but I think I'm convinced that we should just stick with the current thing. Enough is enough. When we're done with it, we just EOL and delete it and then move on and let other people worry about ancient stuff. So that's all I got to say. We don't have to do that now, or if you got spare time later, you can rediscuss this, but that's, but anyway, so read through it. So it's my perspective of what I thought happened, which, you never know how accurate that's going to be. Okay.
I will go through it and
yeah, and feel free to, make changes because it's, I'm not wedded to my prose.
And others also because everyone was part of the discussion, and I think Luigi and Gorka gave some good points, so it would be good if they'd also take a look.
Yeah, I think I got both of your points in there.
Okay, so I will just resume sharing to the old Etherpad. Great. Brian, are we done with this topic?
Yeah, unless anybody's had second thoughts or wants to.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we discussed the release notes situation. Yeah, and to be honest, so it was a fairly long discussion, and I don't know that it was conclusive. So I've got links there if you want to take a look. So I put up a patch a while ago with a strategy that we could use to do the release notes for these SLURP releases. Is I explain in there. So if you want to look, but the basic idea is we got this balancing act because we don't want them to be overwhelming. If you're skipping a release, we don't want the notes to be overwhelming, but on the other hand, we want people to pay attention to them. And we also have conscientious operators possibly who will be upgrading, every 6 months, release to release in the normal way. And so we don't want to have to force them to reread stuff, because if you get in the habit of having to skip stuff, then you might skip something important. So anyway, so the strategy here is supposed to take that into account and work. And it sort of seemed that this was partially okay, but then it seems like maybe it's not. And then I sort of lost track of the discussion. So it seems like what people want is better Reno tooling, maybe, which I don't have any interest in doing personally. So we'll see what happens. I think, so yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I think I should just shut up. And so basically we don't quite know. We need to know something by the end of the cycle, so that, right, we're ready, because this is going to be the first the last release was the first SLURP release. This will be non-SLURP. And then, so we got to have some kind of idea for what we want. But I think the main thing is there's a lot of abstract discussion about what could happen. And I think, so I've got links here so you can look at the generated release notes for what the options would actually look like if you were, say, for instance, Cinder. And I think that makes a big difference to see what exactly you're dealing with. So there hasn't been a conclusion to the discussion. It had to be like time boxed. So we'll see. So yeah, I talked about TikTok, right? And the reason why is when you say SLURP -1, do you mean SLURP 1 or do you mean SLURP -1, as in the non-SLURP release before 1, right? So that's why I did that. So you'll see on that, yeah, I thought about all this stuff. So you'll see it does say SLURP when you go there, but I did tick and talk just because it's more obvious that talk 2 comes after talk 1. And tick would be the one before it or something like that. But yeah,
but you're doing crazy. It's exactly the same with tick and talk. In your comment, you say tick tock and talk 2 and tick 2, and you can do the same. SLURP, non-SLURP, SLURP 2. It's the same problem.
Well,
the dash is the same. You just don't use the dash.
Yeah, see, I just don't know. So it's the way I think.
Yeah, the trick is not using it.
So, okay. So yeah, so I say tick and talk just because I think that's easier. But yeah, my thing was...
It is easier, but I think we should avoid using it altogether, because this is the kind of thing that in the future, it will drive people crazy, and conversations will get all messed up because some people still use TikTok, others use SLURP, and people who only know one of the 2 terminologies will not know what the others are talking about. So that's why I add the comment. It's not just to be, to bother or anything. It's like we've been through this path before, having multiple names for the same thing, and then years later, we're still going crazy with it.
Yeah. All right. So good point. And this patch is over a year old, so I'll sort of, but yeah, that's okay.
I had one doubt regarding this. So
Sure.
For explanation purpose, we can say tick 1, talk 1. But actually, does it really matter? Like, are we keeping count of which is the first SLURP release, which is the second one? Like, we know Antelope is SLURP and C will be SLURP. So do we really need to keep track of it? Like, for explanation purpose, it would make sense. But apart from that, I think the terminology for SLURP and non-SLURP should be enough to differentiate, and like we shouldn't map antelope with slurp1 or double C with slurp2 like this, right?
Well, it's just, you need to know which is the older slurp and which is the newer slurp, right? So it's now that so if we stick with the current naming convention of year dot 1 or 2, then you can just say the ordering is by natural ordering by year. That's cool. And dot 1 is always slurp. Dot 2 is always non-slurp. When I wrote this, that hadn't happened yet. And I guess if we only went to one release a year, right, it would be a slurp every time. I don't know. But yeah, that's another. So the terminology could be simplified. I agree.
Yep. And now, like you say, now that we have the new tags and the new naming convention, it's easier.
Yeah. So as long as we don't use the alphabet anymore and we stick with the official one. But nobody likes to stick with the official one because it's,
Yeah, but one thing is we may still talk about names, but when writing documentation or when referring which one is the slurp, knowing that the first release of the year is always a slurp, it's quite easy to remember. Yeah. Whereas remembering which letter I'm at, is that an even and odd number? It's like harder to remember.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned in the text that the dot ones are slurps, but I don't know that we couldn't have a situation where we're going to do 2 non-slurps in between. So I don't know.
Well, I could be wrong, but the whole slurp, I haven't read anything for a while regarding this, but the original idea is you cannot have 2 non-slurps. It's like the promise is that you can skip one. That's it.
Right.
Nothing more.
Well,
because
actually
if we start saying more, then I'm going to kill someone, because this is crazy for rolling upgrades. You are introducing a heavy burden for rolling upgrades if you have to wait until the next slurp with any possible non-slurp in the middle to remove columns. Crazy.
I agree, but I'm just...
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not sure if it's defined. I think the proposal is that you can go from slurp to slurp.
Exactly. So you can only have one non-slurp in the middle.
That could
unless
be part
they
of it,
change it. Maybe they changed the document when they changed the slurp, but originally when things were called tick and talk, there could only be one tick, one talk, one tick, one talk. You could not have 2 of the same one after the other. That was not what it was thought of. I don't know if they change it. If they change it, we're going to have to be a lot more careful with things.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at. There's a resolution. I'll put a link to it after, so you can see the exact language. I'm not sure. That was one advantage of the tick talk. There's nothing in between a tick and a talk, right? Even metaphorically.
Well, you can always say tick tock tock tick tick. They are just words. You can do whatever you want.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
I was just saying I might not be updated with the latest resolution, but the original mailing thread discussion, which I remember, was like for some deployments, the release model of OpenStack was pretty fast, like 6 months release, so they couldn't upgrade from time to time. That's why initially they proposed a 1 year release model, but that won't work for us. So they introduced the skip level upgrade, so they could skip one cycle and then upgrade, so it's easier for deployers because we can't change our release model. So that was the original discussion to move from 6 months to 1 year. That's why we skipping one release, but I am not sure if there are any recent changes with that idea.
No, I don't think there have been. But I don't know what this actual text says. And I can never find this stuff. But yeah, but right, okay. So the situation with the SLURP release notes is still fluid, I guess is what I'm saying.
So it's still not decided how we are going to generate and if we are going to include the non-SLURP, the previous non-SLURP into the SLURP, the release notes.
I'm not sure. I mean, there's some talk of like merging the upgrade sections possibly into having one big upgrade section. And then another would be to somehow flag stuff in Reno as SLURP applicable. So I don't know. I mean, we had sort of discussed those previously and decided the repetition thing's bad. We don't really want to do that. And then flagging stuff, it's like, I don't know. For the upgrade stuff, maybe you could just say anything that goes in the upgrade section automatically has to be, it makes sense to repeat it for the next one. But like when you get around to like bugs and things, like what we do for our release notes, I noticed, I went back and looked at the Nova release notes that Sylvain's been doing, and they're kind of compact. So if you combine those together, it might not be overwhelming. But when you look at the Cinder ones, because we've been really good about having the driver maintainers write release notes so you know that the bug has been fixed and what it was, we have a lot of stuff in there. And so when you start to say, well, which ones are important, it's like, I don't know. I mean, they're all important. So I think you would just use that tag for everything. I don't know.
But so this is a bit depressing, and sorry if I'm being pessimistic, but I think this is what you're describing is the exact same conversation that happened before. I don't know if 6 months ago, a year ago, I was in a meeting discussing those same topics, and we are still in the same point. We don't know what to do. These are the pros, these are the cons, and they are exactly the same that they were a year ago. It's like nothing has changed in.
Yeah.
And it's fine. I mean, we can make any decision, and if it is not going to be perfect, that's fine. But the fact that we keep talking and talking and talking and not making any decisions seems a bit weird. I don't care if you say, if you're coming from this release, please also read these release notes and a pointer to the previous one. That's fine enough. It's 2 lines or a paragraph explaining, depending on where you're upgrading for or whatever, go read those release notes as well. I mean, that's good enough.
Yeah,
or having 2 different files. 2 different release notes.
No, this is kind of my fault, right? So I made the proposal. I thought I had agreement, and then somebody said, we should really automate this because it'll work. And then I put a -1 on it and thought, all right, let me figure out how to automate this, and I didn't. So what I should have done was just merge it the way it was, and then say we're going to try to automate that. So because I was optimistic about my having free time to work on that, and that was kind of stupid. So yeah, so it's my fault. So that's why I'm kind of depressed about it. And I don't know, because Sylvain started by saying he looked at the generated notes and then said he kind of agreed with the the approach, and then the discussion got completely sidetracked on Reno and all sorts of stuff, and I sort of lost focus. So anyway, so that's my report is that we don't have a definite thing yet.
And for the record, I think if you're going to skip a release, you should know what you're doing. You should know I'm jumping to releases, so I should look at the previous one. So to be honest, I wouldn't go crazy about it. I would just have like a paragraph mentioning, if you're coming from this release, please look at the previous release notes, and that's it.
Yeah, and so the thing was, you just had a helpful link to the page, and if you wanted to, you could stress stuff in your prelude, of particular points that you absolutely want to make sure nobody misses. But the idea was you don't want to overdo it because you want to encourage people to actually read the stuff. So anyway, we'll see what happens.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sort of standing back. I mean, my position is that what we came up with makes the most sense. So see what happens.
I kind of agree with Gorka's points. Like, we don't need to make this too complex for us to, like, maybe we might have more issues in the future to resolve multiple
the other thing is,
around.
Until we've actually done it and people have used this stuff, we don't know what they're going to need and what operators want to do. So I think it makes sense to keep it simple for the first couple of slurps and just figure out what to do. Because I'm really worried about not being an operator myself, figuring out what's important for operators to know. I think so. Anyway, yeah.
It might probably come up with the user survey feedback. But yeah, so even before the prelude, we could just add a section. I was thinking, like, if we combine the release notes of two cycles, a slurp and a non-slurp in the slurp 2 release, then we might end up with like someone upgrading from a non-slurp to slurp. He will see repetition with the release notes.
Yeah, and I think
the points.
Yeah, I think so, and you can actually see that with those prototypes, even though they're poorly named. Right? It's kind of overwhelming. There's so much stuff. But the other point that came up, this is for you, Rajat, because so my aim in doing this was, I mean, when I used to do the prelude and the release notes, it's like right at the end, the gates are broken. You're trying to get the gates unbroken. Stuff's merging or not merging. You're not quite sure. And then you got to write this stuff and you want it to be kind of coherent. So the manual approach probably comes up with the best if somebody sat down and actually combined them. But that's a lot of work. But somebody brought up in the discussion that, we should be willing to do the work. So, but we is going to be you. So anyway, so I'm just saying, keep an eye on the discussion because I think I don't know. It drives me crazy about OpenStack, right? I mean, we've got this big crisis. We don't have a lot of contributors. So let's not make more work for ourselves. So the way we're not going to make more work for ourselves is to come up with a more complex thing that we can tool. And then the tooling will make it less of a workload, although somebody's got to actually do it and debug it and maintain it. So anyway.
Yeah, sure. I will follow through all the slurp discussions. Yeah, and yeah, I should do it more actively. But yeah, I will surely take a look.
Yeah.
Do we have any action items? Suppose, Brian, you have a proposal, I think, in the release management doc. So should we wait that to merge to get the finalized version of what we are going to do and then take some action on it? Or you are muted.
Sorry. I don't know. Let me go look at the way the meeting ended yesterday was that there was going to be more discussion. I put a note that maybe it would be a good idea to discuss on this patch, but I don't know what people are going to do. And I lost my.
It has 2+2s as of now, so maybe there is agreement, but
Oh. Yeah, those are real old +2s.
oh. Yeah, I will also go through that doc.
Yeah, let me find that. I lost the I'm sorry, I can't find anything.
I pasted in the chat your patch link. That's what you're looking for.
No, I was looking for the TC Etherpad from yesterday, which I do have. Yeah, it's line 199. So what came out of it was that somebody should do something. Oh, and then just, this is completely off topic, but it's related to action items. So Gorka, when you get a chance, I got 2 small patches up for CinderLib. There's a unit test that broke because the option got renamed in Cinder. So I did a simple fix for it. You could do something more complicated, but I think it would be on a different patch. And I'm not sure we really need to. So the issue is just that when you deprecate an option, Oslo config automatically logs that it's being used. So it logs a warning. And I think it logs 2 ways. It logs from both directions. So it logs if the code tries to get something, it'll log it that the developer shouldn't be doing that. And if it finds the old name, it'll log that the operator should change it to the new one. But as far as the code where that happens, you're catching an exception, not a log message. But what happened was the test was checking to make sure nothing got logged. Now something was getting logged. So anyway, sorry. Take a quick look at the patch.
I think it's
a good fix, but depending on what you want to do, you could make it more complex if you wanted to. But I don't know that we'd need to. Anyway, and then there's the other one that depends on it is to open up for Antelope. Or no, what? No, to continue Antelope development. Sorry.
I took a look at your first patch, Brian, so it kind of looked good. Like we are just changing that config option which we used for iSCSI, and we have renamed it to target. So yeah, I think that's the kind of change. So it's pretty trivial. Like we even if the old operation is deprecated or removed, we still need to do that change anyway at one point. So yeah, makes sense.
I figure that test is just to make sure that the option gets detected and winds up in the right place when you're doing the configuration group. So it's, anyway. I'm over explaining that one because the last time I messed with the CinderLib unit tests, got them all passing. So,
And should we, like, I was mostly waiting for like a general idea of release notes for across OpenStack, and then we could do similar changes in uh, Cinder. But so do we need to wait for some resolution, or we can, like, this is finalized that we are going to do this kind of linking?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Okay. Are we taking yoga into account? Like, I see some experimental jobs and anything testing the skip level upgrade from yoga to antelope, but we don't officially consider that
Right.
as a.
No, so those jobs were added just to get something in place to figure out how that could work to actually test a slurp. But they've been optional. And I don't know. Yeah. So I think there is a job that goes from yoga to antelope. Yes, that would be right. But it was just to make sure, it was mainly to make sure that you could get the tooling in place that would test that. But I don't know that, do we run one of those? I'm not sure if it's in the testing template.
It's a grenade job. I think we do run it. But
But I think, just sorry to interrupt, I think the other action item is that everybody should review. Gorka's got a patch up with documentation about how the slurp impacts rolling upgrades, and we should probably review and merge that because that's important for us no matter, it's related to this, but it's really completely separate. So it'd be better to just make sure that gets reviewed and that everybody sees that and starts thinking about those issues. Because as Gorka mentioned earlier, it does impact how we handle our database upgrades.
I might be oversimplifying this, but I think the changes we need to do are in double C now, like at least related to release notes, because Antelope and Bobcat will follow the normal release notes they have, and Slurp, like the second Slurp, which is double C, should contain both release notes of double Bobcat and also double C.
Yeah, it's just if the tooling is going to be applied at the time. So the idea is, right, at the time you're doing Bobcat, you know exactly what changes you've done, so you should document them then. And so if the automation is going to grab some Bobcat stuff to include in the double C notes, then it needs to be in place before the Bobcat release notes are written. So we're kind of so we should come up with some kind of resolution before milestone 1 to this, I think. We need to know what we're doing.
Okay, yeah, I'm kind of confused, but yeah, I think we can discuss this later as well. But yeah, I also need to go through the doc to better understand some recent discussions. Okay, so if there is nothing else on this topic, we can move to the next one. Yeah, this is my topic regarding uploading volume to image. So I added this at the time when I literally had not a lot of work items, but now I'm thinking this might need to move. Also, it has dependencies, but yeah, I will quickly summarize what I wanted to discuss. So currently, when Glance and Cinder both are using RBD, and we are creating a bootable volume from image, we use the cow cloning feature that RBD provides to create a dependent image, like RBD image from image to volume, and that operation is pretty fast. So I was planning to do the same in the reverse order when we are uploading a volume to Glance. We could use cow cloning in that. So I created a POC, and also there were some Glance side changes. So I proposed this during the time of yoga. I did some performance testing. I proposed a spec also. So the POC was working. The volume was uploaded successfully. The image was working. I think I booted up a VM from it. So everything was working fine, but it still requires two things. One is the service role for the interaction between Cinder and Glance, because I think we don't store Glance credentials in our cinder.conf as of now. So I mean, we don't have a section where we could store credentials that we could use for client for this type of interaction. And second is the work that Eric is planning to do in Cinder Glance regarding RBD deletion. So once we resolve how this dependency chains can be easily broken and the parent could be easily deleted, then this effort would make more sense. Else we might end up dependency chains from, like, if I create a bootable volume from image, there is one chain, and if I upload the same volume to Glance, there is another chain, and it might make things complex and not allow us to delete certain resources across both projects. So yeah, this effort, I think I will probably put it on hold for this cycle again until all the RBD and Keystone work is figured out. We do have an alternative for the service role to create a config option to create to provide the credentials in the conf and create a client and do the request with that. But yeah, that doesn't seem very clean given we will be having service roles soon. Yeah, that's pretty much it what I wanted to discuss.
So this, right, it's an optional, I'm sorry, what I'm just thinking is that if you wanted to continue to work on this, I think you could just say that to use this kind of feature, you got to have the service role and use the service token stuff that exists in Keystone right now in the Cinder conf and communicate with clients that way. And then eventually everybody will catch up when the service, I don't know what the holdup is on the Keystone side about implementing the service role for bootstrapping so that everybody's got it by default. I think it's just a bandwidth thing. But so what I'm saying is that I think so because I think we don't want to store glance admin credentials in our conf file, just on general principles, I think. So since this is an optional, I'm sorry.
So on the service role stuff, can you all refresh a little bit on why the credentials for this are different from what we have now?
So for some operations, we pass the user token. And so there's no way for the receiving service to know whether the API request is coming from a service or coming from some random person with API credentials. So with the service token, what you can do is you configure Cinder or Nova or whoever, right, to pass an additional
token.
Yeah, they pass an additional token along with the request, and then Keystone middleware will. The original use has been to allow the use of expired user tokens because you got to balance off. You got long running operations that go through several services, like you got to boot a VM, download an image, create a volume, attach all this stuff. It can take a while, and the security teams always want these tokens to expire pretty quickly because you don't want them hanging around too long. So the compromise was that a service could send a service token along with the user token, and then Keystone would handle the validation. And then Keystone you can configure Keystone so that it will, if an expired user token is within a certain window and it's accompanied by a service token, then Keystone will report back to the service who said, is this okay? That yes, everything's cool. But
Yeah,
in addition, okay, in addition,
what's the link with all that and uploading RBD images?
Because yeah, I don't know.
I will need to check again, but I think the problem was like we are not actually uploading anything to Glance. So
that's right.
We might need to do an external and again a request to register a location to Glance.
Oh yeah, you have to be able to see info about the stores that you can't see as a regular user.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so Cinder is going to look at the Glance stores and figure out if it can use this optimization, basically.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to do, it's not only about checking, if I remember correctly, it's also about updating the location, being able to forcefully set a location, which in general they don't want anybody to do. But if it's a service token and we have agreed that this is acceptable, then they will allow it. That was also, if I remember correctly, another of the problems.
The one Eric mentioned that is surely there. I will need to check again for the location. I was mentioning it because I think that was a problem, but I will need to check again. But yeah, checking the stores, that definitely requires the service role. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't very well prepared for this topic, but I'm planning to wait on it until we have all the base level changes in place that is required to support this effort.
By the way, I forgot. You probably said it before, somebody here. What are the missing bits? Because the service token already exists.
Not the service token, but the service role.
It also. Oh, you mean the patch that made sure that those services always existed, right?
So right now by default when you create when you use the Keystone Bootstrap process to create the initial stuff, it does not create a service role. So an operator might be already doing that themselves or might not. So you don't know if it's available or not.
But wouldn't it be, I would assume that the code could just say, if I don't have the service token, then this is not allowed and the optimization cannot go through. So it's a matter of deploy things right. Don't look at me, right? Like we currently have with Nova. If you don't configure Nova to send the service token, long-running operations will fail because Nova doesn't send it. So we go into the situation you explained earlier, Ryan, which is the user token has expired, and as soon as a request goes to another service, it's going to fail. But that is, we have documentation saying if you want this, you have to configure Nova, create your own service user, assign it the service role in configuring Nova. We have that documented, and it's not being done. The service role is not created automatically. We have it in DevStack, that's fine, probably in OOO as well, but that works. So what I'm trying to say is that it should be possible to do the glance feature even without that. Just making sure that if we don't have the token, well, it's tricky. You have two things. You have to have the service token, and the service token role must be between its role, there must be the service role. If that is the case, you can proceed. Otherwise, fail the request, and that's it.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. If Jacques wants to do it earlier, I think since it's an optional thing to configure your Cinder and Glance to both to do this optimization, that we could say, hey, make sure you configure it properly. It won't be automatically done for you. Yeah.
Yep. That sounds good.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. I think the role is important though, because I think when you configure the service token, you can say which roles it will respect, and actually there's an option for whether you pay any attention to that or not. Anyway, sorry, I probably got nothing.
But yeah, I agree. As we could just submit a patch to Cinder explaining this optimization or Glance, I don't know which one should go, but just document it. Say if you want this optimization, you need to have a service. Here is how you do it. Basically copy what Nova has for the long running operations.
this is not really a long running operation. I was thinking like, do we really require the service token in this case? Because I only remember
Oh,
the use
yes, you do.
case.
You do, because Glance is not going to let you update the location if you are not a service. Normal users are not allowed to touch locations.
Yeah, right. Right now, I think there is a whole mess at that part because they have this config option that I think does allow to update the locations, even for non-admins.
Yeah, but that's a security risk. So
Yeah, that's where there's that
yeah,
dual glance mess.
yeah, we could always document, hey, if you don't mind risking your cloud, you can just enable this. Otherwise, please configure the service and do it this other way, right?
So there's sort of
give them
two
options.
things. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, there's sort of two use cases for the service role. One is to have like a service user who makes API calls to another service that no user should ever be allowed to make. So in order to make the calls at all, you've got to present the service. It's just the service user does it. And then you have these other cases where you sort of want to slightly elevate the privileges of the user without losing track of the user as the person making the request. And so those are the cases where you want to accompany the user token you're sending with the service token. And then that can be checked to say, okay, it's okay for this user to do this because the service is really making the request on behalf of them. So I think that's probably a smoother way to do it than to like do it, because you don't want to make a completely new request coming from the service. Do it the other way where the service is making the request and, oh yeah, it's on behalf of this guy. What you want to do is say, continue the current path where it's a user making the request. And then we just somehow indicate to the receiving service that the request is coming from a place where you
basically
can trust them.
On behalf of. They tried to do it a long time ago.
Yeah, with the trust.
Keystone. I never got it to work. It's basically you act on behalf of somebody, but because you're a service and you have the role, and Keystone confirms that you are a service, that you have the credentials of a service, you're allowed to do some extra stuff, but only on the resources of that specific project.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it provides a containment, right? So that by mistake you don't delete everybody's volumes.
Yeah, I still need to go through that lower doc to understand the distinction. So I understand we require the service role. I was just confused about the service token, but I think it's just the token that the service user sends to authenticate. It's the service, like the request is coming from service and not a user. But
yeah, it's just an additional header basically, and we have configuration options in Node and Cinder. When you make a request to other service, do you include a service token? So there is a section where you say, my service username is this, credentials are this, and send it when talking to other services. In terms of headers, it is just an additional token for the service. And then after, on the receiver end, a Keystone middleware gets this token, validates this as well, and fills in the roles for that token. And the importance why I assume Keystone does all this, but if for some other reason we want to do it manually or do some things based on the service token, having a service token is not enough to know that it's coming from a service, because Keystone in that regards does not check that the provider token has the service role. It just checks that the service token is a valid token and fills in the roles. So you could use the same token, my user token, for the request and also for the service token header. You can use the same for both. In middleware, we say that's fine because both are valid tokens, which are the same token. But in the service roles, at the service level, for example, in Cinder or in Glance, you would say, oh, I have a service token, and Keystone has said it's okay. But yeah, but then please double check that it's actually a service. So the service must be among the roles from that user. Anyway, sorry for sidetracking there.
No, that's exactly what I was looking for. And yeah, I think we have right now admin policy that might need to be changed to service on the Glance side to properly adapt it, because I tested out with the admin stuff. But yeah, I think it makes sense to document this, and we don't really need to wait for the service tool to be bootstrapped. And Brian, regarding your question, I don't think there is any blockage, because I checked Abhishek's patch and he had replied to all the concerns, and it's just review, like a re-review thing. When they take another look, it should be merged quite early.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, last time I looked, it was just me, and I have no power.
Yeah, it has +2, 1 +2 and 1 +1 from a core. So when they circle back, they might change their vote to and approve it. Yeah. Okay, so looks like if I want to, I can still work on it. And even for the RBD changes, I think that the RBD read call should automatically take care of everything when the Cinder and Glance side changes land. So I also don't need to worry too much about that. But yeah, I will follow up Eric's patch to see if I need to do some custom changes to make that possible in my patch. Thanks for the discussion. I don't have anything else, so maybe we can move to the next topic then. Let me just update the infra channel. And I also remember Walt saying he wanted to add some topic towards the end, but yeah, I don't see him around. I will ping him after this topic. He wants to discuss anything. For now, I will mark in the channel as done. Yeah, so we have Cinder retype for migration and passing the new volume type ID to drivers So do we have Satya around?
Yes, Rajat, I am here. Able to hear?
Hi.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, hi. Yeah, so there was this initial discussion like where the control was not entering into the driver when the volume type had some additional extra specs other than availability zone and the backending. So we had this discussion like other than those extra specs are present in the volume type, still it should be able to pass to the driver should be able to determine whether they can handle those extra specs or not. So that fix was earlier discussed on. So now what is happening is now with this fix, so driver is indicating whether it can handle the extra specs or not. So it's returning whether it can handle it or not. So after that, it's calling the Cinder migrate call, which is passing only the context, volume, and host. So I tried accessing like information from the host, but it didn't have much of the any data, like which is the new volume type which it is trying to migrate now. So that kind of value was missing there. So to reference that, I just followed through the generic migration, how Cinder generic migration is working. So I was surprised to see the new volume type ID being passed there. So this is a new, this value is crucial because I need this value like to create the volume object, uh, like to create an entry in a DB. So without those value, it's a little bit quite tough. So this is my concern. So, but also I think this is not a straightforward process to add a new volume type ID to pass to the migrate volume definition. So it might impact all those drivers which I've already implemented for this definition. So that's why I thought to bring up this discussion. So since it might also affect the other drivers also.
So I don't really fully understand the whole discussion. I think the main operation we are trying to address is retype here, where we are
Yeah.
retyping from one type to another, and there are some driver properties that exist in the new that exist in the old volume type that are failing this retype.
Yes,
And
yes.
we want to ask the driver if these properties are okay for the retype, and the driver would
Yes.
say yes. So
Yes.
in in the so the migrate volume generic accepts the new volume type because it is used for retyping. Like when we do the retyping, we use the generic migration flow. That's why it's there. And I think you will need to so there should be a method. So I think last time we discussed like every driver can implement a method, like you mentioned, can use driver migration, and it would supply all the parameters that are okay for the migration to happen, and we can include that in the check we have. So we have a method which checks the old volume type properties and the new volume type properties. There we can call the driver and get uh, all the key value pairs, that all the keys that are okay for the migration to happen. So I'm not really sure where exactly you're facing problem
Yes,
with
yes,
this.
yes, yes. So that problem was done. So now the what like during the retype, if it requires a migration, so it is checking one point whether a driver can implement the migration. So that is can use driver migration. So now once a driver sends indication, yes, I can migrate now. Now it's making a migrate API call. So there is a call to a migrate function now. There it's passing only three parameters like context, volume, and host. So it's missing the new volume type ID, which has to be sent. So the first method just gives an indication, yes, I can handle. But now once it in the if condition, it gets to know that, yeah, driver can handle this migration. It will invoke the driver's migrate volume. But there it's failing to pass this new volume type ID, which is missing the essential detail.
Yeah, now I understand. So you're using the generic retype, which we have in the manager code, but that calls
Yes.
the driver migrate where we don't pass the
Yes.
new volume type.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not pretty sure, but we should allow that. I need to check the code again
Yeah.
because for the generic migration we do pass it. So
Yes. That was my concern also because it has been passed into the generic code, but to the driver it's not getting passed. And if it's passed, it would be passed as a parameter only, right? Like new volume type ID. It won't be in any host dictionary or volume context dictionary. Nothing like that, right? We should be passing it like a separate parameter only.
I mean, for a migration to work, it shouldn't be required. I'm just checking the code. So does your driver do anything with that parameter?
Yeah, basically it has to create a new volume for that new volume type, right? Basically, we are migrating from one volume type to another volume type.
We are
So
migrating from one host to another, but we are also changing the type of it.
yeah, volume type also is changing.
But that can be done outside the migrate function, right? Like we can do it in the, yeah, I will first just check the code because I might be, uh, but yeah, I will just confirm.
Okay, okay, sure.
I was just going through the code, and it's strange to me looking at it right now, because when we call the migrate volume from the manager, I will just paste the link here. So in the manager method, we have for migrate volume, we do accept all these parameters, but when we check the drivers, like let me take example of any del driver type this PowerFlex one, then we don't. Maybe there are different calls, but I think it's confusing for me as well. Like the manager method accepts it, so the driver interface has the correct what do you call the method signature that the drivers use, but in the manager we have a different method signature for migrate volume.
Yes.
But again, my question is like, do you require the new volume type ID in your migrate method in your driver? I think it's the IBM driver. So do you require that?
I'm trying to create this new volume object, which is kind of requiring that parameter.
Okay, I see. I missed this part. Like we do call the migrate volume of the manager, and that method calls the driver method. So
Yes.
yeah, so I think it's correct. Sorry if I got people confused, but there is the call to the driver method, and yeah, it's not passing it. And I don't think we need it even in the driver migrate. Like we just need to migrate the volume to that host, and we can change the volume type things in the retype.
Yes. From the retype, the value is getting passed, but somewhere while calling the driver for migration, it's missing out.
Yeah, it shouldn't pass it because I don't think the driver has any use of the new volume type, right?
But see, once eventually migrating a new volume type is the one which I'm trying to migrate, right? So in the command itself, I'll specify the volume name and the new volume type ID to which I'm trying to migrate. So the first step would be to create a volume of that specific volume type. So I'm trying to create using the volume object, which is missing now, volume type. And then there is a progress to migrate volume data from the old one to that, and a host attach is also there. Yeah. Generic volume migration has this very good implementation there. So it demonstrates clearly what's the use of new volume type ID there.
In the generic volume migration, we do create a new volume and remove the old one. That's the flow we use for generic, like that works for all the drivers. But the drivers do it in a smart way that they can just move the volume from one host to another. So that's what I was saying. Like we just need the host values in the driver. Like I was just checking
Okay.
the del
Okay.
driver.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Eventually, after the call from the driver, it is updating the volume type. But also, yeah, we were also trying to mimic what Cinder is now trying to do. So creating a one volume and then migrate it and removing the old one. That we were trying to achieve.
Yeah, if you just want that flow, like you can just leave it up to Cinder to do the migration. Or but if you want to, I think, do it in your driver, then I think this is a expectation that the driver can just migrate the volume from one host to another and shouldn't revolve around volume types for like shouldn't be needing volume types for doing that. But yeah, others can also chime in, but that's my understanding of it. Most of the drivers uh, do it this way only.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, most of them are doing it this way. So, mm, so that means I wouldn't be like, so in Cinder generic migration, what it's doing, like when I do a Cinder list command, I can see two entries there. One new volume, which is would be in available state, and the old one, which would be in retyping state. But if I do it in the smart way now, I wouldn't be able to see that entry of the new volume, right? And eventually at the end, the retyping status would change back to whatever the earlier state it was.
Yeah, if your driver has a backend call which can just migrate the volume from one host to another, you should be seeing only one volume. Cinder is
Okay.
creating having two volumes at the same time. Like the source one, it creates a destination one. It attaches both the volumes and copies data from one to another. I think
Okay.
using a DD operation, but yeah, that's the way Cinder does it. So
Mhm.
it's pretty slow as well. I think the driver can do it in a much faster way. So that yeah, and if you just want to rely on that behavior, you can just skip your migrate call in your driver and just uh, rely on Cinder to do it.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
So when you discussed this earlier, you had an example of, I'm trying to remember. So can you give us an example of exactly what it is that you need to get out of the new volume type? Because there was something about an extra spec, I thought, that gave you some extra information for how you should handle this on the back end.
Yeah, sure. So we have this new feature in the back end. There is a specific type of migration policy which they have implemented, which copies data from one volume backend to another volume backend. So that's why we wanted to implement this kind of migration from our driver only, rather than Cinder migrating it. But most of our operation is similar like what Cinder is currently doing. So currently it's trying to create a new volume object of the new volume type ID, and it is trying to detach the volumes from the original volume from the host. And I think it's trying to calling the Nova for the swap volume method, which is eventually calling back the migration completion code. So in the migration completion code, what it is doing is it's marking the older volume for deletion. Once after migration is complete, it would delete the older one, and the new volume would be updated to the new volume type ID. So since I was doing it for the first time, so I kept the my generic migration as a reference for the code flow, how they're trying to achieve the migration there. So only thing here is I need to pitch in and I have to call my driver's specific migration call. That's all. So that is where I need to call my driver. So or else I would have used this generic migration.
I've just noted down some points of our discussion. Yeah, and hopefully that resolves your issue that you're facing. So do you have a patch up upstream, or are you testing these flow locally?
I'm testing this flow locally, but I think I do have fixed the patch for the ca can use driver migration. That patch is I have already pushed.
Yeah, I was just planning to mention it here, so we can take a look as well.
Yes, 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 yes. So this is the patch. So I think I have fixed all the UTs and a driver to make a decision whether it could handle the extra specs.
I, I think the idea was to implement a new method so the driver could return all the properties that were okay to be part of the extra specs. Here I don't see any changes in the IPM driver returning anything. And we are just implementing a new method in the driver interface, which is not
Yeah, so I think this was a fix, right? It was not specific to a driver, so I think it was a common fix. So I have kept this bug fix to the common code itself. I think for driver code, while we are pushing our migration changes, I will be pushing that code.
okay. So this is part of a series you are planning to do.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let us know in a weekly meeting when that is ready. So we can probably
Yes,
move
yes,
forward that discussion.
yes, yes.
That's it for this topic. I have pinged Walt if he wants to discuss his topic, but he hasn't replied yet. I mean, I pinged him just a few minutes ago. Maybe it's too early for his day and he hasn't started his day yet. In the meantime, does anyone have any other topic to discuss for today? They can bring it up now, or okay, I guess everything is discussed, and it won't make much sense to hold everyone much longer. Wait for Walt. We can discuss his topic in our upcoming Cinder video meeting or in the mid-cycle. So I will just stop the recording.